Today we're going to continue our discussion on supply and demand by considering non-price factors and their impact on demand and supply. We'll begin with a quick review of the impact of price to changes in quantity demanded and quantity supplied, and then we'll go right into the non-price factors that cause the entire demand curve to shift or the entire supply curve to shift. We'll give some examples to show how these factors apply in the real world, how you see them in your everyday lives, and then finally, we'll learn the impact on price and quantity. So let's begin with a quick review. A change in quantity demanded or quantity supplied occurs only when price changes. And this is moving along the curve. So if we look at this graph for a moment, we see that at $8 a pizza, we have 30,000 pizzas that can be sold, point A. Point A is the market equilibrium. That is where the quantity demanded of 30,000 pizzas meets the quantity supplied of 30,000 pizzas at the price of $8. So what this tells us is that at $8, producers are willing to supply, looking at the supply curve, 30,000 pizzas, and demanders or consumers are willing to buy, looking at the demand curve, 30,000 pizzas per month. In order to get people to buy more pizzas, in order to get consumers to demand more, you have to lower the price. So to increase the quantity demanded, moving down the curve to, say, point C, which would be 36,000 pizzas, an increase of 6,000 pizzas per month, you've got to lower the price by $2. And that makes sense. If you've ever gone to a Costco or a Winco and purchased something in quantity, say like a tray of 36 bottles of 36 bottles of water, each bottle of water is cheaper. That's how they get you to buy more of the bottles of water, by lowering the price of each bottle of water. So you're paying less per pizza or per bottle of water, right? And you're buying more bottles of water or pizzas in this case. That's to get demanders to buy more. To get suppliers to provide more or produce more, you've got to raise the price. You've got to incentivize them to make more. So for example, point E shows that in order to get suppliers to provide 50,000 pizzas a month, you've got to raise the price from $8 to $12. So you've got to go up by 50% in your price to get them, suppliers, to go from the 30,000 pizzas to 50,000. So there are two separate concepts that are moving the quantity demanded or quantity supplied, or in other words, moving you along the supply and demand curves. But both of them are based on price. So price is the only factor that causes a change in the quantity demanded or a change in the quantity supplied. But what if price is not the factor? What if it is a different factor? Well, let's look at the factors that shift the demand curve. We begin by consumer preference or consumer taste. Consider that nowadays people like a product that is gluten-free, or they want chicken that is free-range chicken, or they want something organically grown. These are all preferences or different tastes people have. It could be their income. It may be that a person has $100 in their pocket and the good they're looking at costs $90. Well, maybe the good that costs $90 is discounted from a price of $200, a huge discount. But the person doesn't want to spend 90% of the money they have on one product. That has to do with income. Notice the price doesn't really matter. It's how much of the income the price takes up, right? The product's price takes up of that income. Next is the price of a substitute good. Well, the price of beef may be cheap, but the price of chicken may be cheaper. And if chicken is seen as a substitute for beef, the person goes with the chicken. They're both low priced, but the price of the substitute good is cheaper. Complementary goods. Every good has other goods that are needed to make the good work. For example, a cup of coffee doesn't do you much good unless you buy the cup. Or a car doesn't do you much good unless you buy gasoline and car tires. So car tires, the gasoline for the car, or in the other case, the cup for the coffee, these are all complementary goods. They go with the particular good. And if the price of the good, say gasoline or car tires, if that changes in price, that's going to have an impact on whether you buy the car. If the price of the cup gets very expensive, let's say a cup of coffee goes for $12 because the price of the cup is $11. Well, you may not buy the coffee, but not because you don't want coffee, it's because the complementary good, the cup, has gone up in price by so much. And then the last two, population and expected future price. Well, in Idaho, we've had a lot of towns where the population, has increased by quite a bit. People have moved in to the town, and that has changed the overall demand for a particular product. Or we've had companies leave towns, and the population has decreased by quite a bit. That also changes the demand for a particular product. So when you have a lot of people moving in and out of your market, it's basically what we're saying. And then finally, the expected future price. And that is what you think the price will do in the future. So if you think the price of gas is going to go up by double in a couple of weeks, you're going to buy a lot more gas today. If you think the price is going to stay the same or go down, you're not going to change your buying habits. So notice again, it's not the price of gasoline, it's what you think will happen to the price of gasoline. So let's look at an example. A change in consumer preference, change in taste. So we have a recent study by Mothers for Better Education, which claims there's a positive correlation between teenagers who play video games and higher test scores. So parents responding to that study naturally say, I'd like my child to do better in school. So if playing video games for a few hours a week helps them to do better on tests, well, I'm more likely to buy more video games. So parents increase their purchase of video games. And what do we see on the graph? We see at the bottom, along the x-axis, the quantity has increased. People have purchased more video games, and correspondingly, the price has gone up. Now look at this graph for a moment. What you see is that there's been a curve in the demand curve, right? There's been a shift in the demand curve to the right, and that shift has been because the quantity purchased has gone up. People are purchasing more video games. But notice something. The parents that are purchasing video games, they're purchasing video games at all the different price points. So you're not moving along the curve. It's not like expensive video games are being purchased, more of them are being purchased, and cheaper video games, more of them are not being purchased. It's all video games where we see the increase in the purchase. Therefore, we're going to shift the entire demand curve to the right, increasing its quantity. And of course, with that, we have a corresponding increase in the price. Why? Because anytime you increase demand for a product, all price points on that product, you have an increase in your price. What about the supply side? Well, we have factors that can shift the supply curve. First, the number of producers. Just like the number of buyers coming into a market or leaving a market, you can have a change in the number of producers coming into the market or leaving the market. The next one is the one that should be very clear to everybody, and that is the cost to produce goods. Labor cost, your wages, cost of materials, cost of capital, energy, all the costs that go into starting a business and running a business. Technological advancements. Well, obviously, if you have some technology that allows you to be much more efficient, to make more goods in the same hour, you can save or lower your costs, therefore save money and charge a little less. So your price is going to be affected by the amount you can make and how costly it is to make the product. Just like in the cost to produce goods. These two are changing how much you can make per hour, per day, etc., per time period you're measuring, and also change the cost overall to the product, and thus how much you can charge based on how much you can produce. The last two, government subsidies and taxes. Obviously, if you're given a subsidy, which is the government gives you money to lower the cost to make your good, you're now going to price differently, and you're probably going to make more, a different amount, because it's simply cheaper to do so. You're being handed money to make a particular good. The opposite, of course, money is being taken from you in the form of taxes, and thus you have less money. You perceive a higher cost, and you're going to tend to make fewer goods, and you're going to tend to charge more. And then finally, the expected future price. Do you think the price of the energy you need to make your good is going to go up or not? Do you think that the price of wages are going to go up or down or not? And that's going to affect how much you supply, how much how much you make of a particular good. So let's look at an example. Redbox was very phenomenal in the market because it came out with these entertainment rental machines that were basically very small self-service stores that they would put outside of all kinds of retail stores. So essentially, people didn't have to drive to kind of one location in order to buy, to choose different types of entertainment. They could just go to the machine itself, which there were a bunch of machines all over town or all over the area, and they could go and they could make their choice from there. So this proved to be such a popular business model, so successful, that it put out of business many traditional video rental stores. Video rental stores like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, who eventually both had to declare bankruptcy. And so what you see here is, while you had more Redbox entertainment rental machines, kind of more Redbox kiosks or vending machines out there, you had fewer producers. And so you had many more traditional stores go out of business. Not only the large ones like Blockbuster and Hollywood, but all kinds of individual owners that were not franchises, retail franchises, individual owners. And so overall, the market went down, the market shrunk. There were fewer producers. What happens then to the supply curve? Well, given the number of producers decreased, selling all different price points of video rentals, in other words, renting expensive videos, very cheap videos, games at high prices, games at low prices, all the different price points, given all of them, there were fewer producers. That meant that the curve shifted to the left. And of course, that is a lower quantity, a decrease in the quantity, and a higher price. Why a higher price? It's a more scarce good. There's fewer producers producing them, and so there's a scarcity of the good. Fewer goods mean each good becomes more valuable, more scarce. And therefore, we see that we shifted the supply curve to the left. Now, of course, that's going to have an impact on how much people are willing to pay to rent, and you'll notice that as the supply curve shifts to the left, we have moved up the demand curve. We've gone from point Q to Q1 and point P to P1, and so our market equilibrium now is where Q1 and P1, right, where they line up at demand curve D and supply curve S1. So our market equilibrium has gone from supply curve F and demand curve D to supply curve S1 and demand curve D. Lesser quantity, higher price, because we've shifted the supply curve to the left. So to summarize, price is the only factor that moves you along either the demand curve or the supply curve. A lower price tends to lead to a greater quantity demanded, moving down along the demand curve. A higher price leads to a greater quantity supplied, moving up along the supply curve. And of course, equilibrium is the point where the supply curve and the demand curve, where they cross, and that is where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So in order to shift the entire demand curve to the right or the left, or in order to shift the entire supply curve to the right or the left, is based on all factors except price, the non-price factors. Thank you.